Teithio dros ei llwybrau a thaim o'i hyd. Tir oedd ein dewinoedd ar gan yn un ar gwynt yr
Hello and welcome to the Eryri podcast. I'm Donna Williams, Sustainable Tourism Officer for the Eryri National Park Authority, and I'll be your host for today. In this episode, we'll be discussing a range of topics in relation to sustainable tourism, from community-based projects to the impact of litter on our terrestrial ecosystems and how we can tackle this with reconnecting people with nature. And finally, how we collaborate with other national parks on our shared vision for a sustainable visitor economy. Our first guest for today is Meleri Davies, Chief Officer of Partneriaeth Ogwen. So thank you for joining us today, Meleri, and welcome to the podcast.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
So I thought it'd be a great point to start on if you could give us an introduction really into what Partneriaeth actually is and what are some of the kind of purposes of the Partneriaeth Ogwen.
So Partneriaeth Ogwen is a social enterprise. We were set up back in 2013 by 3 community councils just coming together to develop projects and operate in a more innovative way. Since then, we started really in 2014 with 2 members of staff. We're now a team of 23 staff. We've developed a number of regeneration projects, from developing a community hydro scheme to developing community asset transfer projects. We own 9 buildings in total, and those buildings are either home to some of our projects, community projects, or they're home to tenants who are local businesses. In terms of regeneration, the work that we lead is quite varied, but I'd say sustainability is at the heart of everything that we do, and that's social, economic, linguistic and cultural and environmental sustainability. So that's a brief overview of what we do, I think.
Fantastic. It sounds obviously you cover lots of different aspects there. And I think, community and sustainability really is at the heart of what you do in Partneriaeth Ogwen, which is absolutely fantastic. I think you'd probably agree with me when I say that welcoming visitors to the national park is really important to all of us. Of course, we want to provide an opportunity for the understanding and the enjoyment of the special qualities of the national park. And I would say that Dyffryn Ogwen in particular has a really strong connection with, as you've outlined already, its heritage, culture, the language, and there's a really vibrant community spirit there in Dyffryn Ogwen, which is lovely. So I suppose the question is for you is, how is that important to encompass within the visitor experience, and how can our visitors really get a taste of that, of what Dyffryn Ogwen has to offer?
That's a very good question. I think providing an authentic Welsh experience for visitors is important. I think people, when they come here, they should get a proper feel for the community, the landscape, and the area in general. And at the moment, I'm not sure if that's true. I think in terms of Dyffryn Ogwen, when people come up to Cwm Midwell, do they realise that they're coming to, the national park? Do they realise that they're coming to a Welsh-speaking area? Over 70% of the population of Dyffryn Ogwen speak Welsh, probably as their first language. So it's something for us to be proud of, but it's something also that we should be guarding and safeguarding towards the future. But I think in terms of tourism, there is a feeling as well that we have an opportunity to take ownership of elements of it. And if we take ownership of elements of the tourism sector, that is, do it ourselves, I think that kind of Welshness and authenticity and community-led tourism, that would come organically. We've got examples of projects that we're running at the moment. Bws Ogwen, I think we'll come back to, but we would like to potentially develop a community-led bunkhouse with sustainability at the heart of that project. So it's an asset transfer project in the centre of the village. We're currently developing the community wing of the building, but down the line we're hoping to get some grants to develop a community-led bunkhouse there, where sustainability or attracting sustainable tourists to the area, that would be kind of the basis for the business plan. We're also developing a heritage centre on the high street. If you think of Bethesda and the heritage, the slate industry heritage that we have here, at the moment there's nowhere in Bethesda where you can have a feel of that history. There's no museum. There are a few interpretation boards, but nothing much. So when tourists come here, they could be in a totally different location, really. There's no kind of feeling or interpretation of our history. So with the Heritage Project, we've just purchased an old spa building on the High Street, and the aim is to develop that as a heritage centre, but also as a restaurant, and also some units for local crafters, so a retail space. And all these projects, they kind of linked around that idea of improving the tourism offer to Bethesda, but also improving the facilities for local people, and the educational material that are available about our local history and heritage, so that we can share that with other people, locals, tourists from Wales, but also international tourists.
Wow, there's so many exciting things going on there, Meleri, and I really agree with you there. I think attracting the visitors here to really have a taste of what we've got to offer, I think it does help then as well when visitors have an understanding of the area better and really experience the culture and the community. That helps us then with creating that respect for the area when they visit, and that real appreciation. And I think then they take a little piece of Eryri home with them and spread that message then to others. And I think that's a great way in terms of helping to develop our visitor economy more sustainably, isn't it? So yeah, and something you did mention there, of course, was Bws Ogwen. Sustainable transport is high on the agenda for many at the moment, and Ogwen in particular is a very busy area. Of course, its geological status, the rare wildlife, and the ample recreational opportunities in the area does attract high visitor numbers to the area all year round. And of course, with its geological, geography, it is difficult. We do have limited parking available in the Ogwen Cwm Dwell area. So naturally, with high visitor numbers and limited parking, that does cause pressures in terms of traffic and parking challenges. And last year we had the Trossachs T10 bus, which was launched to operate with a bus service from Bangor to Corwen, which drives through the different Ogwen Valley area, which has made some way, of course, in trying to promote using public transport to access Ogwen. And then, of course, we do have the Bws Ogwen, which was launched by Meleri Davies quite recently. So I think, would you like to just explain to our listeners what exactly is Bws Ogwen and how did that come about? And how can our visitors use that, make the most, and of course local people as well who want to access Ogwen more sustainably?
Well, Bws Ogwen, it's an electric minibus, 9-seater bus that takes people from Bethesda up to Llyn every half hour throughout the tourism season. until November, actually. And I think it's an example of how Partneriaeth Ogwen kind of combine those pillars of sustainability in one project. So you mentioned the parking problems up at Llyn Ogwen. So Bws Ogwen will hopefully be alleviating those problems, parking issues, reducing carbon emissions in the national park, but also bringing economic benefit to the village, because at the moment, tourists have been travelling through Bethesda, not stopping here at all, not spending any money in the cafes and in the shops. So there will be hopefully, some economic benefit in terms of creating more footfall on the high street in Bethesda. And also, in terms of community benefit, the bus, beyond the tourism season, the bus will be available for community groups to alleviate transport poverty. So, it's combining those elements. We've been lucky enough as a social enterprise, we can apply for grants. So the bus has been funded through European funding. And it is a pilot, I suppose. We'll see how it goes this year. I think the main challenge for the project is to kind of educate tourists about the service, about the T10, and also Bws Ogwen before they come. So it's a matter of kind of educating people, promoting the service. At the moment, we have a lot of local people using the bus as well, which is lovely, actually, because you could say these hotspots, local people don't go there in the summer because they know of the parking issues. They know it's going to be full of people. So, it's a way of kind of bringing local people back to these beautiful spaces that they actually own and love. So it's making a contribution in that sense as well.
That's brilliant. And I do think that, of course, is important. Everything we do, really, community is at the heart of sustainable tourism. And it is important that, as you say, communities get to experience those special qualities of Eryri as well. I think it is brilliant that, using the Bws Ogwen, for example, it's more than just, using sustainable transport and being more green. It is about being able to go into the community in Bethesda there and experience, the community and the local products of the area. And I think that is something important as well, isn't it, to, shop local and etc. Is there any other messages you would provide our visitors in that sense of, if they're coming to visit Eryri, what would you advise them to do if they wanted to come and visit Ogwen?
I'd definitely tell them to go green and access sustainable transport. That could be a bus service, but it could also be a bike. We've got an electric bike scheme, Bikes Ogwen. So if they come to the Llyn Ogwen, they can hire electric bikes from Bethesda and take the bike up to Llyn Ogwen. So it doesn't have to be Bws Ogwen either. I think in terms of supporting local businesses, please do that. Don't just stop in a supermarket on the A55. Think about stopping in Londis, Bethesda, buy your lunch in Caffi Seren, pop into Shop Ogwen where you can buy local crafts. Eryri is much more than the mountains. It's about the people, it's about the community, it's about the businesses who operate here. So please show that your support for those people.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've really summarised there everything that, the Llyn Ogwen has to offer and how our visitors and local communities equally can access the area more sustainably and get the most out of the area. So I think that's pretty much everything we want to cover for today. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you with us, Meleri. It's been great having you, and I'm sure our listeners have had plenty of things to take home and think about with them. So thanks again for joining us today, Meleri.
Diolch, Dana.
Diolch. So our next guest today on the podcast is Dom Ferris from Trash Free Trails. Hi, Dom, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Dana. Yeah, thanks very much for having me, and thanks for inviting me to the English version, because my Welsh is super tipping back.
That's great. I'm sure we'll get you learning on the Welsh soon enough. You'll be pro by the end of the year, hopefully. So I thought we would just start today on the podcast. There's probably many of our listeners perhaps who haven't heard of trash-free trails before, so it'd be great if you could just give us a little bit of an introduction and an overview into what and who trash-free trails are really, and I suppose what is your main mission as an organisation?
We're a relatively new, young organisation. We're a community interest company, but we kind of run like a charity. And based on my time at Surfers Against Sewage from 2010 to 2019, and during that time we recognised that there wasn't really the same kind of representation for recreational trail users as there were for beach users. So it was based around that, and there wasn't really much conversation going on, certainly positive conversation going on about the amount of single-use pollution, plastic, pollution, litter we were seeing on our recreational trails. So that's kind of where it started. We're an organisation that welcomes anyone, whether you're a rider, runner, roamer, or we started using the word dipper because most of us, myself included, finish most rides or runs with a dip in fresh water. And again, as our name probably implies, on the surface, our mission is relatively straightforward. It is to create a sustained reduction in the amount of single-use pollution, formerly referred to as litter, on our recreational trails. But then the next layer to our mission is equally important, if not more so for us, is and reconnect people with nature through what we call purposeful adventure. So really, it's for us, it's about bringing recreational trail users together in such a way, inspiring, informing, and hopefully equipping them to protect and enhance their trails in their own way. That's it in a bit of a nutshell, really.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think you've really described that in a great way there for listeners. I'm sure they will have an understanding of what trash-free trails is, and of course they can look you up afterwards for more information on your website if they want some more details about what you do. So I suppose litter really, whether that be plastics, single-use products, organic waste, it's a challenge which is not unique to Eryri, to Snowdonia National Park. It's something we see everywhere, and it's not a new problem either, really. However, I would say it's been, increasingly challenging in recent times, particularly following the COVID pandemic, where we've seen a lot more people wanting to access the outdoors and protected areas and seeing, the benefit from having access to the outdoors. And perhaps we've seen a new audience of people who perhaps haven't maybe not as aware of what's expected when you visit a protected area. For example, there aren't as many bins accessible in the national park as what you would have in an urban area, and that's perhaps led to that increase in litter that we've seen in the national park. So I suppose the question is really, how do we tackle this issue of litter? And I suppose you'd probably agree with me that it's going to be an approach which takes several different aspects and brings them together and working with different people. And I know one of the things that you've worked on recently is a really interesting piece of research, the Trash-Free Trails State of Our Trails report. And that looks at the plastic pollution within our terrestrial ecosystems, and it's really fascinating. So I thought you could explain to our listeners, what is the report? And I suppose, why is it important to have a study such as this? And what were some of the key findings you found in your report?
Thanks for that. And I know me and you have had lots of great conversations already, regarding your research and the research that Snowdonia National Park are doing, which is why it's so nice to be speaking like this and working together in the background. So the State of Our Trails report was kind of a project that came about just by necessity, because when I began to try and create a structure, or turn trash-free trails from an idea or an Instagram post into an organization, I realized that one of the key things, if you're going to create sustained change, whether that be actually behavior or more widely policy or systemic, you need evidence for that. So I started, as I would do at Surfers Against Sewage, I started looking into the state of our trails. So how much litter is out there? There's got to be some good research on that. What impact is the plastic litter having on forest trails, and all these kind of things. And what I found was there's none. It wasn't just that there wasn't much, there's none, which was completely incredible to me, you know. And so straight away I was like, well, okay, we have to try to change this, even in our own tiny way. So the State of Our Trials report was born as an idea, and I said, well, let's make that the hub of all of our work. So a bit like a wheel, you know, like all of the hub drives all of our work, but is also fed by our work. So there's a few lovely reasons that helps and adds purpose to people's donation. So if you're someone who just is totally happy and content with just heading out and removing plastic pollution from your trail every day over the years, that is wonderful. But some people like to evolve their relationship, so they might feel like they're getting stuck on a hamster wheel if all they're doing is picking the same bits of trash up from the pig track every time they go. So it's like, well, let's add some purpose to that. Is it by removing it and reporting it to us via our citizen science report forms, you can contribute to building this body of science that is a massive gap in our understanding. So that's where the State of Our Trials report comes from. And I thought, well, rather than, how can I make this the most robust and respected project possible? Well, there's no better way of doing it than making it an academic project. So then I sought out an academic partner and got really lucky. It was lovely. Met my supervisor, Dr. Martin Kerr, at a workshop in Portugal. Turned out that Martin was one of the authors on the plastic fibres in our wash study that went really big a few years ago, and it just happened really naturally. So for us, again, that's another important part about our work, is let things happen organically and naturally, and meet people and form relationships and form trust, which makes it sustainable. So yeah, and that's led us to the research project, which is not finished yet, actually. Dana, I only did I handed my literature review in, which is the first review of the existing science on the impacts of plastic pollution on recreational trail ecosystems in May. And we're now 3 months into the in situ ecological monitoring. So weirdly, yesterday I was in Gwydder Forest in the rain monitoring for the second month, and we found some exciting evidence yesterday, for me anyway. And the idea is that we want to try and establish a baseline understanding of the causes, prevalence, so how much is out there, where it is, and impacts of single-use pollution on recreational trail ecosystems. And we'll be publishing that next June, and hopefully alongside some work with Snowdonia National Park as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. And it's citizen science based too, so it's all designed to be replicable by people who would like to participate in their forests, on their trails, in their parks. That's it in a little bit more than a nutshell. Sorry for the
No, that's great. It's great to get a good idea, and it really will be interesting when that report is released. I think, it's something later that we all know anecdotally, that we see it in our national parks and on our trails, but it's really important to get that deeper understanding of, like you say, the prevalence of the litter, and that helps us then to understand how do we go about tackling and managing that problem, doesn't it? So
I think
fantastic.
Snowdon's a perfect example. So Snowdon, so there's a few elements of the few survey elements we're doing, especially ones that people can participate in. We've got prevalence. So the way we establishing prevalence is by conducting trash counts. So that's looking at the abundance and distribution of trash along either a loop trail or a linear section of trail. So Snowdon's perfect for that. Is you start on the bottom of the Llanberis track, walk to the summit, and along the way you count the number of items you see. And you also, using a Komoot, which is a navigation app, take a photo of that item and it records it in space. So then you can do a distribution study. And then we also do the summit too. So you've got this 7-kilometer picture of trash. And what that means then is, like, where are the hot spots? What kind of items are we seeing in the hot spots? And then what targeted actions could we deliver there? So could we put signage up? Could we spend a day speaking to people at the halfway house about how orange peel is actually harmful for that space? Because probably, Dana, like, the amount of orange peel I see, especially on that little stop off point, is amazing. Little things like that, and then the survey is about composition. So we go deeper and we go, right, we found 700 pieces of trash on this trail. What were the materials, what types of things, and what brands of things? So then we can do a wider study. Maybe we're finding loads of water bottles that are sold in the cafe at the top. So then straight away, okay, we can go and speak to them about it. It gives us ways of being purposeful and not just like scattergun outrage about the problem.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think as well, as you say, with the citizen science projects as well, I suppose if people really want to help and take part and understand how they can have an impact on bettering our environments and communities, this is a great way to take part as well, isn't it? And along that, I suppose, with tackling litter, something you've spoken about previously is that nature connectedness. I suppose, but there is evidence that people have lost their connection with nature over the years, and it is really important in terms of this to reconnect with nature. So what would you say in terms of nature connectedness? How can this help us with tackling the issue around litter?
Yeah, there's a wonderful saying that it's a Jacques Cousteau quote, and it says, people protect what they love, but they love only what they know. So we kind of base it, that's a really, keep that in the back of our mind. And again, if you to distill the problem that we're trying to tackle as Trash Free Trails down to one word, we distill that down to disconnection. So disconnection with the environment, disconnection with society or your role in community and contributing to it, and disconnection with yourself. Again, I would say that all three of us in this call, regardless of my accent, I grew up in Mid Wales, so I love Wales with all my heart. And the thought of doing something to harm the trails that give me so much, it's unimaginable for me. It would feel like a form of self-harm. And for me, I'd argue that's because I feel such a connection to it. I feel such a gratitude towards it. So, the people who are finding it okay to leave litter, to do a poo on the railway lines, and leave plastic wipes on there, there must be a disconnection there. So our first port of call before condemning people is to figure out why that might be, and to see if we can help create connections, to include them in our communities, to make them feel like they can contribute to the health of this place, and to change their relationship with somewhere like Snowdon. Snowdon's it's wonderful for all kinds of reasons. It's iconic, it's symbolic, so you can use it as a storytelling, as a storytelling tool. So for me, it's like, in my imagination, I think a lot of people are consuming Snowdon right now, as opposed to immersing themselves in it or spending time in it. There's a sense of, like I say, convenience culture. I turn up, I tick it off. So they see it as like an amusement park, whereas we see it as this wonderful place that we're part of, that we should be grateful to have. So yeah, can we flip that relationship? And the cool thing about the citizen science element is that kneeling down, pulling apart the grass, like smelling it, getting your hands dirty, what better way to get to know something than to be that close to it? So for us, it's got lots of facets of purpose to it. Yeah. So that'll be it really. The big deal for us is to stay positive. So, not condemn anyone before we've given them a chance to see what we see. Brilliant.
Yeah. And do you have any tips or advice for people to perhaps try and reconnect with nature?
Yeah, so what's really nice, and what's even cooler to be on this podcast right now, is that we're moving into the last weeks of our Summer of Purposeful Adventures project, and as you said at the start, Purposeful Adventure is kind of the second part of our mission. And what that does, it broadens the remit a little bit from just focusing on litter picking, and it says that we believe that it's no longer enough to simply leave no trace of our passing through these places, because there's already so much out there. We need to leave a positive trace, and there's a number of ways you can do that. We're encouraging people this summer to leave a positive trace on the on the places that they visit, and that can be on the places. Maybe you do a litter pick, fill a bin bag, fill your pocket. You could leave a positive impact on the people that you pass. So have longer conversations with people, like learn people's names, ask about their history, go to the local village shop, ask questions about that place. Is there a choice between the co-op or the spa in Llanberis or the veg shop? Go there, ask about it, contribute to these places. And what you'll find is actually that you become part of them as opposed to passing on the surface. And then the other one is self. If you do want to go and bag Snowdon, go stop halfway up, go and walk around a little bit of a corner onto the saddle, sit down and just breathe for 2 minutes, 10 minutes, just be in that place, slow down and maybe change your mindset from consumption to contribution and immersion. So there's little tips, but really you can go to our website and we've got a whole Purposeful Adventure webpage that gives you tips, and it also signposts the signposts you can click on to other organisations such as Snowdonia National Park, who are doing cool things too that you could take part in. So yeah, join in, become a purposeful adventurer. That's the start.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for that, Dom. So yeah, you heard it here. Definitely, if you're out visiting the national park, it's something that you can do, of course, is to immerse yourself within the special qualities of the national park and to experience the language, the culture, the heritage, the environment, all of those things really, and just make your time here feel authentic and enjoy your experience at the national park. So thank you very much for that, Dom. I think you've really summarised a lot of cool things there, and there's lots for our listeners to take home and consider ready for when they want to come and visit the national park, or of course if they live within the national park as well, some useful tips there for visiting on a day trip perhaps. So thank you for that. All the best as well with the rest of Trashby Trails and writing up that research report. I'm sure we all look forward to hearing when it's launched and finding out some more cool details of that. So thanks again for joining us. It's been great having you with us.
And thank you very much. Sorry, I just got sidetracked with the chat. Thank you very much. And like I say, the bottom line is, if you're heading out into our beautiful natural spaces, or even just your trail from your front door, just remember that you're part of it, and you can contribute to it, and it as much as it looks after you.
So I'd now like to welcome our final guest to the podcast, Kenny Auld, Head of Visitor Services at Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park Authority. Welcome to the podcast, Kenny. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So I suppose it would be great for those of us particularly who've not had the pleasure of visiting the Loch Lomond National Park, maybe if you could give us a brief introduction first, a little bit about the national park and its topography and some of its special qualities, and a little bit about your role in the national park and managing it.
Sure, yeah. So it's a bit of a mouthful. It's got a terribly long email address, but it's Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, and it stretches just to the west of Glasgow, about 40 minutes drive, even shorter at some areas of Glasgow to the west, and then it's a good hour's drive north and a good hour's drive to the west, and an hour's drive to the east. So it's a significant space, and we can be visited we're within an hour and a half's drive of Edinburgh. On the edge of Glasgow. Stirling's not far away, which is one of our bigger conurbations. So we're kind of in that boundary between what we call the Central Belt, where a huge population of Scotland lives and works, and then getting into the less populated rural areas. So we're in that kind of transitional area, and we've got a huge array of upland access, but also sea lochs and indoor lochs. Indoor lochs. I wish. Freshwater lochs, and Loch Lomond being the most famous, but we've got a number of water bodies of different sizes and depths and different types of historical access. So it's a really interesting landscape. Really, we've got different areas within it, and some really highly used areas, some really quiet areas, some different communities of different social demographics and different backgrounds. But culturally, it's always played a really, really valuable role, this area, even before the national park status came in 2002. It's been a really kind of been important part to recreation for the country, and particularly for Glasgow.
Lovely. Thank you for that little overview, and I'll definitely have to come and visit sometime. It sounds like a great place to visit. And I just wanted to talk, I suppose, as national parks, we of course have our statutory purposes which help us manage the national parks, of course, to conserve and enhance the natural beauty, wildlife and cultural heritage of our areas, and to promote opportunities for the understanding and enjoyment of the special qualities of national parks by the public. However, here in Eryri in particular, since, the COVID pandemic, we have seen changes in our visitor number trends. We've particularly seen high concentration of visitor numbers during peak seasons, and that naturally has brought pressures and challenges around conserving that balance between the two statutory purposes. And I just wondered, in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, have you seen changes to your sort of visitor trends post-COVID, and what sort of challenges has that brought with it?
Yeah, so I suppose across it, going back to your earlier question, I forgot to tell you what my role is in this, and as head of visitor services, we have an access, recreation and sustainable transport team. We have a ranger service, a large ranger service, and we have a visitor management team. So it's great to have those three threads working in tandem across the whole service, and all three of those have seen the kind of trends. I wouldn't say changed, because I think the trends were there pre-COVID. That's a personal and professional point of view, I suppose. But and the data does back that up. But we definitely saw an acceleration, and we definitely saw particularly peak weekends that really taken to levels we'd never seen before. But the trends were always around growth, and the trends were always around increased participation in the outdoors, and that was happening. We've seen other national parks across the UK maybe having seen a change in audience. We have always had a broad audience, so that wasn't a change to us, but some of the volumes we were seeing in some areas was. So I suppose the numbers we've seen, particularly at Lochside, water recreation nationally in Scotland is up about 10% to pre-COVID. All our anecdotal evidence, and we're doing some research at the moment, is that water recreation and Lochside recreation is well beyond that within our area, and that Loch Lomond would see, the rangers yesterday were saying around 15 to 25% increase at times on kayaking and paddle sports and open water swimming. So you're looking at huge trends, and upland access, certainly we saw a huge growth and a jump into people escaping and enjoying kind of mostly our more accessible hills. Sometimes we're still working up names to call these new trends, but or accelerated trends, but certainly kind of social upland walking. People really enjoying, not looking for solitude, really embracing, enjoying a collective experience and a collective enjoyment of a landscape, and seeing kind of popular hills being popular for a reason, and wanting to be part of that. So it's really interesting to see how then we can redesign infrastructure to cope with the bigger numbers, and how we can redesign our kind of resources and our messages. But the volumes have been there, and because we don't have any sustainable transport, those volumes equal more cars. And particularly through COVID, people weren't car sharing, the messages weren't around car sharing, so it was really a car per person, and that brought huge challenges.
Yeah, it's interesting, that topic, of course, around, sustainable transport. I think it's a challenge that we see across the national parks in the UK, and particularly here in Eryri. Recently last year we had the parking and transport review carried out by Martin Higgett and Associates, around parking and transport solutions, and some recommendations around more sustainable transport ideas for Eryri. And there's some really great projects and recommendations which came from that review. And I just wonder, I suppose, how can we best share these practices between other national parks? And is there any way you take learnings from perhaps those and try to implement them in the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to, just because it's your podcast, I wouldn't really want to say this, but I mean, we have learned a lot from your colleagues at Snowdonia, so I would say that happens as a matter of practice across the 15 UK national parks. So we do have groups of specialists who share information and learnings and apply what's appropriate to their areas. So that already happens, and we've now commissioned a study very similar in background and purpose to what's served Snowdonia so well. So I think that happens, and we want to see that continue, and make sure that's building, because we're all facing the same challenges, and there's definitely discussions around shared research, and making sure that there's no repetition and we're not reinventing the wheel that another national park has potentially invented. But it goes beyond the UK. We're aware these challenges are being seen across the world, and we've got really good links with national parks across Europe. Some really excellent work happening in Catalonia that some of your colleagues and myself were able to see firsthand at the Europark conference in April. So there's a bigger network than the UK, and there's definitely Universal's particularly high volume visitor destinations like ourselves, the Lake District National Park, Snowdonia. They're really kind of we're able to share things, but there's some really interesting stuff happening in Europe as well that we're sharing. And kind of relating back to your last question, I suppose, is it's the balance between visitors and nature and climate, and where are we finding the balance? We want people to value these areas, we want them to continue to visit, but it's making sure that we're designing infrastructure and services that mean that potentially even more people can come out, but that their impact on environment and nature is minimised and beyond. And seeing where that's appropriate to do. So I think it happens, as it's probably happened through poverty, because we've been under-resourced potentially historically, and you need to seek counsel from people doing similar jobs elsewhere. But I think at the moment it's high on everybody's agenda, and we're being kind of empowered to look outwardly and talk to people who are doing similar work.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. And I really think it's definitely something, working in partnership with others, it strengthens our messages and the work that we do, doesn't it? And learning from each other is one of the best way forward. And we all have that shared goal, I suppose, of having the sustainable visitor economy, and it helps us all to achieve that by working together. And I suppose in line with that, one of those things you briefly mentioned there is, encouraging visitors, on visiting responsibly. And we can do that through our, communication methods. And I just wondered a little bit about what is sort of the main visitor communication sort of key messages you try to share with your visitors to the Loch Lomond and Trossachs, and maybe a little about some of the communication methods you use there, and perhaps what are some of the methods you find most useful in terms of engaging with visitors?
So we've got a huge number of different channels to different types of visitors, I suppose. And I'll go into some of our online and social media stuff, but I suppose so core to that is staff on the ground. And because of the level of pressures we've seen in Scotland, that you've seen in Wales as well, and it's been seen in other places, but because of the level of points there was government funding brought into, there's a fund called Better Places, which refunded essentially lots of lost ranger posts over years, and brought specific kind of funding for boots on the ground, so that we had really expert communicators on the ground influencing behaviour, but also educating on how people can minimise their impacts on the environment and where is going to be busy and what. So that's once people have made the decision to arrive and where they're going. But it's really, really important because we know the social media channels are not going to reach everyone. None of our communication channels are going to reach everyone. And there'll be people here who on the ground who need really, really solid advice on where to go or behaviours. So that's been really welcome, and we've seen that having a huge difference, not just in the national park here, but across the whole country. But in terms of influencing people coming and giving them the most information pre-visit, I suppose a lot of our social media and our website carries car parking capacity information right up to date that's provided by staff and volunteers, which means that a visitor can see which car parks are full from the earliest point, and they can check on their journey, or somebody can on their mobile phones, to make sure they can get a feel for how busy the national park is, and that kind of either raises or lowers expectations, but at least it sets expectations to a realistic level, and it means that people are prepared for what they might kind of find once they've made that journey. We promote national messages around respect and protect and enjoy, so that we don't try to. Scotland's a very small country. We try and fit in with the messaging as the whole country. Obviously, in the national park, we can amplify elements of it, but it's really important that we work as a collective. So there's a national campaign around that. We talk about it being a great place to enjoy, but that should come with respect and protection, and that value should kind of come through that. And we really focus on camping, parking, fires and barbecues, water safety. We unfortunately, historically and particularly last year, had a couple of very high profile drownings, and consequently really analysing whether we're doing everything we can in partnership with other bodies around water safety. A big focus, and delighted we've seen far less incidents this year, which is great, even with greater participation. And litter and toileting, which quite often dominate the headlines and some of the discussions, but really important. I think through COVID we saw that also businesses are a huge part of the visitor management matrix. If a business isn't open, then you don't have the toilet that offers it. You don't have the food and drink, the kind of packaging and recycling elements that can be concentrated in an existing business, and then suddenly that is out there in a more disparate kind of infrastructure. So we've seen that, and that's not gone away. It was really obviously constrained through COVID, but also we're having to work with businesses to see, because of the labour market. I'm sure it's the same in Wales. Hospitality are really struggling to find and retain staff, and understand how they can function to the level that they did pre-COVID. So there's more people here, but potentially less business facilities. So it's trying to work with that. So some of our messaging again is to give a clear picture to visitors, so they're not expecting one thing and getting a reduced provision when they arrive. And I suppose the last thing is plan ahead. It's really trying to. I know a lot of your work down is around planning ahead and changing that mindset from a spontaneous, oh, this is at a whim. It's considering and making a conscious decision of, yes, I really want to go there, but what do I need to prepare to make sure that I can enjoy my visit as well as I can.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. There's lots of sort of similar messages there between the two national parks, of course, and other national parks around, visiting responsibly and safely and respecting the areas and communities that you within to get the best of your experience. So there's lots of similarities there, but also some things which are more unique to Loch Lomond and Trossachs. So it's great to hear some of your key messages there. And as I say, it's always great to learn from other national parks on some of the things that you focus on and what we can take from that as well, and perhaps try in our areas too. So it's really interesting to hear that from you there. I think we've covered lots of useful stuff there, actually. And I think that's probably about what we have time to cover for today, unfortunately. I'm sure we could talk for hours on end about the different projects we have on in the national park. It's been really interesting to have you on and talking with us today. We've definitely learned some useful things. So thank you for having us as host you on here. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us today.
My pleasure.
On a final note, I would just like to thank you all for listening to us today on the Eryri podcast. And just a little reminder to follow us on our social media pages, and for any information relating to the National Park and sustainable tourism, we have lots of information available on our website. Thank you and see you again next time. Goodbye.